Hey gang, as part of my Revolver research, I've had a number of interesting pieces start to come through C&Rsenal's doors, and yet we're not always ready to film whole episodes on them. It would be well over a year before you'd see anything on this Jocelyn, unless I did a short video like this, so I'm going to try to squeeze them in when I can. Now, as I said, this is a Jocelyn Revolver. This was a 5-shot muzzle-loading, percussion-fired, 44-ish caliber handgun, and it's considered to be pretty much the worst that was issued to the Union, at least as far as being out in the field. There are some suggestions that there were guns that weren't even sent out after being purchased. But this guy is notorious. Now, most of his problems actually stem from the way they bored the cylinder versus the barrel, and with the finickiness of being a side hammer operation. But this gun actually has a very, very unique lockwork, or, well, I guess I should say the lockwork that's concerned with rotating the cylinder, in that it has a lot more to do with, say, like a K31 Swiss straight pull rifle than your average Colt. And I thought that's something that you guys might want to see. So let's take a closer look. Now, this is a single action only revolver, so full cock, pull trigger, hammer comes crashing down, and there's a rebounded position like you saw for carrying it safe. I'm going to go ahead and let the hammer all the way down, though, because I want to unscrew the arbor, which is at the rear of this particular action. Now, these are theoretically serrated to help you do this, but this one's been chewed on just a bit. Give me one moment, folks. A bit of offstage grunting and pulling it into my lap, and I managed to get enough leverage to get this guy started. As you'll see, we're unthreading from the front there. Fair bit of grease, even though it's been lubricated recently. It still hasn't chased out all the old rust, and we'll just go ahead and set this guy aside. He's not our concern. Cock our hammer, let that cylinder out. As I promised, 5-shot, not really the most interesting part of this gun. Instead, I want to show you, that's not going to show up too well unless I put that arbor back in. So, put that there. See about getting you out again later, but there we go. Here we can see one of the most unique hands I've ever seen in a revolver. It's right here. It's a spring-loaded plunger with a slight bias on one side. You can see I can push it into the, well, actually it's in a drum. We can't see that very clearly yet, but trust me, there is a drum here that has a diagonal groove cut into it. There's a rod in that groove. The rod is connected to the hammer. I'll show it to you better in just a second. Now, normally a hand would start way down here, and as we cock the hammer back, it would travel up to turn the cylinder. In this case, this is the lowered position of the hand in this gun. If we cock the hammer, it's going to rotate over top. And when we fire the particular revolver, these were notorious for having heavy triggers, by the way, it rotates back down. So, see if I can keep that in focus. One way, and then back. On the reverse travel, in order to keep the cylinder from rotating backwards, there's a bias on this side, and therefore it gets pressed down into its little housing and snaps back up, where it will grab one of the ratchet teeth for rotating the cylinder. That's a fairly interesting way of getting it done, but I'm sure you guys would like to see that drum. Just going to remove this little set screw that I already loosened. Don't lose that. Actually, they're missing on a fair number of these guns. And we'll set that aside, and we'll just push this guy out. This groove here is for that set screw that allows it to travel but not escape the firearm even when the arbor is released. And then, oh boy. Okay, that's fantastic. Let me show you how this might work. First, let's look at the hammer for a second. Looking inside what would be the breech face, you'll see a little nub in here. It's directly attached to the hammer. If I cock that back, see it go back, back. All it's doing is traveling in an arc, but it's making it ascribe a straight linear action, right? Just whoop back and forward. Now that linear motion of that rod, I mean, granted it's going in and out a bit in terms of our groove, it's going to rotate our drum. So here's our drum and a piece of metal I happen to have laying around. And if we push the metal through, it's going to naturally force it to rotate because of the groove. If we pull that way, again, it's going to force that rotation. Back and forth, 1/4 turn. Well, technically 1/5 turn because this is a 5-shot revolver. Also, while we're in this position, you guys can see there's a cross pin that holds on our hand, which is in itself a plunger with its own spring. These guns were prone to not necessarily indexing the next round. I suspect the biggest problem with that was likely that this little channel is fairly easy to clog up with black powder fouling, so if that little piston got stuck, your gun's not going to rotate anymore. So it'll get pushed in, snagged up with smudge, and then it won't make it back out, therefore no rotating. This same principle, by the way, shows up a lot of early straight pull and semi-automatic rifles, because again, you want to take this linear motion of some piston, you want to translate it into rotation, usually of locking lugs. But in this case, we're rotating the cylinder. Now, this particular design, as far as I know, was patented in 1858, which puts us well ahead of the Swiss. Hopefully someday I'll get to cover the rest of the history on this firearm, but I will say, while we're talking about it, most people think of Jocelyn in terms of the carbine, but Jocelyn, as a revolver inventor, was actually fairly tenacious. There are at least 14 patents that I know of that are ascribed to him and wheel guns. A couple have to do with this particular gun here. Most interestingly, he did seem to try to give it a quick load and unload option, somewhat like the 1860 Moore pistol, where the cylinder would swing partially out and allow you to load or unload one round at a time, a sort of swing out cylinder, which I found to be very fascinating and forward-thinking for its time. All right, hopefully that was a worthwhile glance at an unusual pistol. If you guys like this little format, let me know. Again, I don't think it's going to be very consistent, but I do feel like we've been leaving a lot on the table, and it'd be better to put it in front of the camera. All right, y'all have a good one.